it's me, Jay, your GM. I use he, them, and this is another episode of DM Advice. This time we are going to go over the next step of creating your campaign, which is expanding the pitch document. So as we said last time, we have made our campaign setting. The world of Ardoon, a mystical land with two suns. It is floating skylands drifting over a ruined world. We've got our setting. We created 3 pitches. Since last time, I read all your comments. Thank you very much for leaving the comments, ranking these. It was kind of a blowout. Depths of Ardoon really didn't do very well at all. And then Realms of Ardoon was the winner, and Dreams of Ardoon was the second place. But Realms of Ardoon, by far the big winner. How did I tally up the scores? So for each first place vote, I give a pitch 2 points, 2 of these little tick marks here. For each second place vote, I give 1 point, or 1 of the tick marks. And then for a third place vote, I give 0 points. So Realm of Ardoon is our winner here. So that is the pitch we're going to be expanding into a full document. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and I'm going to create the section headings, which will guide our construction of the premise and of the campaign. Okay, so this is where we need to make a couple of very small decisions that are going to have some high impact about our setting. So I've taken a Droon and I've broken it out into its own heading. I think that we need about a paragraph of text for our players to understand a little bit about the sort of high-level concept of the world. That paragraph is going to come directly from the 2 things that we decided last session, which are 2 suns and a floating skylands drifting over a ruined world. We're going to take that and expand that out just ever so slightly to give a bit more of a grip on the world itself. So you need to make a couple of decisions here. First of all, floating skylands. How many skylands? And it's probably a good idea to just sort of generally name the 3 skylands right now, because it's very likely your player's going to want to be from one of the other skylands or something along those lines. And so at least having a basic, very, very high-level overview of the 3 I'm going to go with 3. The 3 skylands would be a good place to start. So I think, if we're talking about D&D, right, the sort of classic 3 environments that I think are really fun are, I think a forest is very important for all the fey creatures. I think that probably mountains are really important for all the sort of dwarven creatures and aerial creatures. And then I think a sort of more middle ground one, where the sort of humanoids live, is probably also important. Considering that we are starting a game with 2 kingdoms, kingdoms to me feel very human, and so I think we're probably starting in the more middle ground humanoid one. Okay, I'm going to be back in a minute after I've got that all fleshed out. 3 floating skylands, Marielda, Astrum, and Valinair, drift through the sky over a ruined world. Marielda is an island of plains, light forests, and human kingdoms. Astrum is an island of rocky mountains surrounding a harsh desert landscape. And Valinair is a densely forested island imbued with chaotic and dangerous fey magic. This story takes place on Marielda. The world itself is pulled between twin suns, Kreos, the calamitous sun, and Lemos, the renewer. Now the world enters the era of drawing closer to Kreos. Misfortune is surely on the horizon, and our heroes must strive to survive. Again, keeping it short and punchy and dramatic. I haven't thought about any of this stuff too much. I haven't, expanded out on any of this stuff. I don't know anything about the cities and continents and whatever of Valinair or Astrum. I've just kind of generally figured out, I need a place to put dwarves, I need a place to put elves, I need a place to put humans. Here they are. And that's it. So by doing that, by keeping my focus on the high level, by not getting too lost in the weeds, I can very quickly iterate and expand out on. But already, you can see that there's much more of a setting here. We've got 3 specific places. The specific places have different ecologies. Those ecologies are going to inform the people that live there. We're creating important, defining characteristics, but at the same time, keeping things open and broad enough that we can still play around and have fun. The next step is to get into the local area. So the local area, we've already kind of defined some of it in the backstory, in the pitch, right? So we've got a lot of basic information, but we want to kind of give players enough information to make their characters. And players, generally speaking, need to know what is the kingdom like, what is a danger in the area, what is the local factions, what are the ancestries that are common in the area. These are the things that are going to help them pick their class, pick their ancestry, and that sort of thing. So additionally, we want to know the religion. And then nearby, I'm going to list what other cities and places are nearby, so that, a player might, not want to be from this specific part, but they might want to be from around, and then have come in. And that also opens up a little bit more options as far as ancestry goes. Because if you only have humans and half-elves in this area, then you can put a nearby town that's got, orcs and goblins and stuff, and then if they want to play an orc or goblin, they can just be from that town and come in. Obviously, our pitch kind of limits that a little bit, but we'll do what we can to make it as permissive as possible. So it's about 25 minutes later, and I have finished my pitch document. So let's go through what I did and why I did it. So first of all, after the first section, I went through and fleshed out the Ardoon. Having that, I then kind of began to think about the regional history. So when you're thinking about the regional history of a region, one thing you want to avoid is a sort of medieval stasis or medieval stagnation kind of thing. Think about how kingdoms in this fantasy timescape are constantly changing hands and so forth. So the Kingdom of Paldron, which is our campaign premise, was founded 500 years ago by the good King Galian Peladrian. His line ruled for 300 years. It was a nation which existed in and around a fey-touched forest. That gives us a few more racial options. And Galian himself married an elven woman named Ashera, who reigned as queen for 100 years after he passed. So now we're creating a sort of mixed elven and human lineage in Paldron, which again, opening up more racial ancestry options for our players. As such, it was a city of mostly human, elves and half-elves. Around 223 years ago, the ruler was Talon Peladrian. He was a cruel, greedy, and violent leader. His harsh taxation and brutal enforcement drove many of the young, able-bodied men and women into the forest, where they turned to banditry. I'll put men and women into the forest where they turned to banditry. So again, we're trying to figure out, why did this kingdom fall, right? So obviously a bad ruler is a great dramatic story beat, right? He drove many of the young able-bodied people who could have been soldiers for the city into the forest. But let's go ahead and add in a second element. Many rogues, thieves, and scoundrels exiled from the northern kingdom of Harstad began to raid and pillage the 7 cities of Paldron. Harstad is a city in the northern, bitterly cold hills of Marielda, which is our continent. Inhabited by mostly humans, Goliaths, and a smattering of winter dwarves. So again, now we've got a second location that you could be from. You could be from this very harsh, wintry city of Harstad, where all these bandits came down from. These bandits joined with the people who'd been turned to banditry by the evil king, and they collectively overran Paldron. However, soon the exiles of Harstad turned against the people who'd been driven to banditry, and it just fell to more and more fighting, and so Paldron was never able to really reassert itself. It just fell into ruin. The nearby kingdom of Glintmore kept a couple of the cities alive, mainly as a buffer between themselves and this now massive army of bandits. Glintmore is a kingdom of mostly humans, orcs, and goblinoids. So again, more options for players if you want to come from Glintmore. The neighboring kingdom of Glintmore has recently driven out the last of the bandits and reclaimed the capital city of Paldron. They have tracked your family down as the last surviving rightful heirs to the local throne. They have offered their support in raising Paldron back from the ashes, but what do they get out of it? creating some potential hooks for drama down the road. Paldron was a massive city at the heart of the kingdom. Although the king ruled the city, he had a royal council with 7 members, each from the 7 major cities of Paldron. They met 3 times a year to discuss new laws, ordinances, and activity. Fairly straightforward governance style. 7 is a magic number when it comes to factions because it is easy to remember, but at the same time complicated enough to feel, politically complex, right? And as you play the game, you can kind of start to define what do each of these cities want and so forth. I've actually kind of narrowed it down even more because if you see in the next, the 7 major cities were Tavenshire, Danmore, Leydoun, Aramath, Cranst, Therry, and Oldenholm. 4 of those cities have fallen in the centuries since, but Leydoun, Cranst, and Tavenshire still remain. The leadership of Oldenholm also escaped the destruction of their city and have survived in Leydoun, always dreaming of the day they could reclaim their lost home. So right away, Paldron has potentially 3 cities that it can go back out to and maybe ally with, right? Get people and recruits and soldiers and start reforging that kingdom, right? But each of those cities is going to have things it wants, and maybe the heroes are going to have to prove themselves to the cities. You're starting to set up, like, really interesting down-the-road stuff, right? Also, having Oldenholm's leadership in one of the other cities, obviously they used to be nobles. They want to go back to being nobles, right? So they're going to maybe come to the heroes at some point and be like, hey, help us go into Oldenholm's ruins and clear it out like Glintholm did for Paldron. If you can do that, then we'll reestablish and we'll be loyal to you forever. And so maybe that'll send the heroes off on a new adventure trying to reclaim Oldenholm from whatever has taken roost in its ruins. Religion you could spend a long time worrying about, but here I have only set up the most high-level overview. I've decided that there are 4 pantheons. So there's the pantheon of dragons, of elementals, the pantheon of Kreos, one of the suns, and the pantheon of Lemos, the other of the suns. It makes sense if there's 2 suns, people would worship them, so maybe each of the suns has a god, and then beneath that god there are that god's children. Perhaps even they were once married and then divorced, and now there's like this tension between the 2 pantheons. They've chosen sides, and there's like maybe a war brewing between the gods, and so like maintaining that balance and peace is a big part of things. All of this very interesting, but I don't want to go too far into it right away because again, you're just creating a lot of work for yourself, right? Give the basic ideas. If somebody wants to play a cleric, then obviously at that time you're going to have to put in a little more work on the pantheons and figuring out the religion. But for now, you should just do the amount of work that is absolutely necessary to get by. And I think that this gives people evocative ideas about what religion is like in this world, but it's not going to, force you to do too much work. Finally, nearby, I listed these sort of 4 nearby locations. Obviously, Glintmore and Harstad, we already sort of established these places. It's Harstad, not Harthad. Harstad. Yeah, so Glintmore and Harstad are the 2 neighboring kingdoms. We've listed what ancestries are in both. But also we have the Winter Hills, where Aarakocra, giants, ogres, bandit clans, and Firbolg. I don't know why I said bandit clans and Firbolgs live. And then to the north, or around the city, we have the sort of fey-touched forest of elves, goblins, satyrs, and centaurs. They have no governance and coexist in a wide number of druid tribes. So this gives you plenty of story potential as, like, maybe one of these druidic tribes shows up one day. How do our heroes deal with it? How do they make peace with them? Do they make peace with them? Do they fight, Maybe a really evil druid tribe is bothering several of the other druid tribes, and now they come asking the heroes for help. And if they do help, then maybe some of the elves who remember Paldron from their childhood will be like, oh, yes, I want to come back to my, I want to help you rebuild this place. It was such a wonderful place when I was a child. There's all that opportunity for story, but, by creating these basic structures, you're sort of laying the groundwork. And, one of the players might be from one of those druid tribes, or maybe they learned under one of those druid tribes, or something like that. Now, the big limiting factor here is that because the players are supposed to be a family, right? So there's the real risk of like, oh, they have to pick one ancestry for everybody. But what I would say is that maybe each of the children is the last descendant of their family line, but they could be from different lines of that family, right? Like for Glintmore, they don't care who rules this place, so long as they are theoretically noble. And as long as they theoretically have a rightful claim to Paldron, they don't really care. So maybe there's like, two families, right? That's up for the players to come from. So like one family of orcs who've been living in Harstad, and one family of half-elves who've been living out in the woods or something like that. And they're kind of like, we're distant cousins, also kind of competing for the throne. That could create some nice inter-party tension and drama. It's also possible that maybe one of the players plays a Glintmore knight sent to help them adjust to life here, or to protect them while they rebuild their kingdom. That's obviously going to have implications for that player. They're not going to be able to participate in all the negotiations and stuff that other people could. There's a lot of different ways you could go about that. So I think this is the kind of expanded pitch document I would send to my players. It has one thing I like to do. I like to bold any racial options that come up. That will help players draw the eye to be like, oh, I'm thinking about playing a goblin or something. Oh, I see goblinoids. Okay, what's going on with goblinoids? Glintmore is a nation of human. Okay, so maybe I'm from Glintmore. Gets the ball rolling on that sort of thinking. I want to make this as easy to process and as quick to read for players as possible, so I want all the information to be upfront and concise, right? I think that, if you can take, I took 25 minutes to write that. I've taken 50 minutes total to record this video. That's stopping to talk about things as well. So if you can take an hour to make a document like this, again, you've got your setting, you've got your campaign rolling, and now with last time we spent maybe a half hour, an hour preparing, and this time we spent maybe an hour preparing. With 2 hours of work, we have a custom, brand new homebrew setting. We have a exciting premise. We have a politically complex world. And we're ready to start playing without having to spend weeks and months obsessing over every little detail, because we can always flesh that stuff out as we play. The important thing is to get to the table and start playing. And as players come to you asking about, what's the religion like in my town? You can talk with them and add on to these things. And by having that blank space, you can create something totally new that didn't exist before. And eventually you are going to kind of define out your full list and feel pretty satisfied. And that sort of creative period where everybody's adding stuff to the world is going to end, but that's just the natural part of running world. That just means that your world is more finished now. More of it is set in stone, more of the clay has dried. But in this early part, there's no reason to rush to try and get to that finished state as early as possible. I've been playing in my setting for 4 or 5 years, probably more like 7 years at this point. 7 years, and I feel like I'm just now getting to that clay is dried phase. And there's been so much that would not be true about my world if it weren't for the players adding it. And that's one of the most fun things about having a homebrew setting. So I hope this helps. I hope this gets you motivated and inspired to start playing and to start getting out there. I hope that it gives you confidence, because I really do think that you can do this. And if you've been, if you felt overwhelmed previously, hopefully this shows you how simple it can be, how with 1 hour of work, you can have your own custom homebrew setting that is fun to run, that is full of ideas you love because you made them all, that is politically complex and interesting, and that is ready for play, for years of play. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a good one. Goodbye.